Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time the question comes to us from Ember Fist, who asked, "Hey Thor, why is it that the Jedi in the prequels are seen by so many fans as being in the wrong? Qui-Gon is held up by these people as an ideal of what the Jedi should be, but in any other story, Qui-Gon would be in the wrong for playing so fast and loose with the law he is trying to uphold. And why is it that the Jedi are protecting the Republic, and by extension all beings in the galaxy, also seen as being in the wrong? What would be the alternative?" Okay, so I don't think the Jedi of the prequel era were wrong, as much as they'd lost sight of their true purpose. Or maybe I should say how to best accomplish that purpose of, essentially safeguarding the galaxy and maintaining balance. That is indeed what they're supposed to do. And I think that in The Phantom Menace, the big difference that we see between Qui-Gon Jinn and the rest of the Jedi is that the rest of the Jedi, or the Council, they seem to be more beholden to the Jedi Code and the will of the Republic. They follow the strict set of laid out and rigid rules and laws and will not deviate from them.
The code forbids it.
Whereas Qui-Gon is only bound to the will of the Force. He always lets it and it alone guide him, and he thinks where it is directing him, or where it needs him to be, or what it needs him to do, that it should supersede any sort of rules or Jedi code because, well, it's the Force, and that's what the Jedi do. They serve the Force for the sake of the greater good. And what good are these rules or code if they prevent them from doing that? Basically, if the Force wants or needs them to do something, it shouldn't matter if there is a rule in their code that forbids them from doing it. Qui-Gon is not just breaking the rules because he's a rule breaker and likes to do his own thing. He's quote-unquote breaking the rules that are preventing him from carrying out the will of the Force. And since what the will of the Force seems to be is just this innate desire of the Force to find or be in a state of balance to achieve a sort of harmonious state where the people of the galaxy are essentially allowed to live freely, that means that, yes, the goal of the Jedi and the goal of the Republic, more or less, are one and the same, that they should align. It's not so much that there is an issue with these two organizations working together. Rather, the issue is more that the Republic is dictating the actions of the Jedi, and that may not be leading them down the right path exactly. That it may be preventing them from following the will of the Force and doing what is needed to be done by them. And do keep in mind here that, as I see it, the Jedi are basically the means by which the Force can act in the galaxy. They hear the will of the Force, and then they try to carry out that will. The Force cannot just make everything it wants to happen. The people of the galaxy very much have free will, though they also have a destiny they can follow if they choose to, as George Lucas himself has even talked about. And I know some will point out that Obi-Wan says this to Luke in A New Hope.
Remember, a Jedi can feel the Force flowing through him.
You mean it controls your actions?
Partially, but it also obeys your commands.
But the key word there is partially, and really what I think Obi-Wan is talking about here is something more along the lines of reactions. That if you let the Force flow through you, if you use it as an ally, you'll have good reflexes and be able to see things before they happen and that sort of thing. You'll be able to block blaster bolts, for example. It's not that it can literally make choices or decisions for you. Again, make everything and anything it wants happen. I mean, there wouldn't be much of a point to Star Wars if the Force could just sort of rectify problems on the macro level whenever it wanted to. If it could just eliminate the Sith or any other issue that may arise with the flick of the Force wrist, if you will. Star Wars wouldn't be as interesting if free will was just an illusion, if the characters we see weren't actually making the choices they do, but instead just following a set and completely inflexible path to their one and only fate. In my opinion, one of the things that makes Star Wars so great is that the Force is not like some sort of omnipotent god, but rather it's the characters and how they use this power that shapes their own destiny. It's the decisions of the characters that dictate the course of events and the story. And even when the Force does seem to get involved or take a more, shall we say, proactive approach, like with the creation of Anakin Skywalker, the creation of the Chosen One, there's no guarantee how things will turn out, and everything will still come down to the choices and actions of Anakin in this case. I really like that the Force cannot just make whatever it wants happen, which kind of brings us to something else I see many bring up when it comes to the Force and what it can and cannot do. Something that I've had a few friendly debates over, and you know who you are, that being Watto's chance cube role that Qui-Gon Jinn manipulated before the pod race in The Phantom Menace. The argument here is that if the Force really wants Anakin to go with Qui-Gon Jinn, it'll simply make the chance cube come up blue. But I'd argue that the Force, again, can't just make the roll go how it wants, but that it can kind of do that through Qui-Gon Jinn. That the Jedi, as I was saying, they are the means by which the Force can act to make things happen that it wants to happen. Though, of course, the Jedi still has free will, just like Anakin ultimately did. They still have the choice to use the Force in the way the Force wants, to serve it, or to use it how they personally want and maybe become a Sith, or to not use it at all, I suppose. But anyway, I'm maybe getting a bit off topic, and I think the main reason why many say the Jedi of the prequel era were wrong, or even go so far as to villainize them, is because of the way they treated or handled Anakin Skywalker. I have seen many people make the claim that if, say, the Jedi had just been maybe a little more understanding, if they'd even gone so far as to save Shmi Skywalker and give Anakin a little peace of mind, that he never falls to the dark side then. That you can't just say to someone who is struggling with fear and loss to let it go or to stop caring so much about the thing you fear to lose. That'll solve your problem.
Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose.
And if they, the Jedi, would have just listened to Anakin a bit more or talked with him, if they had tried to help him through it instead of just, again, saying what he had to do was to just give up the things he was afraid to lose, well, maybe everything turns out differently. And there is even a new book, Rise of the Red Blade, that tries to essentially make this point as well. And I won't go too much into detail here, no major spoilers or anything like that. But the point the book tries to make is that the Jedi had become little more than a bunch of empty platitudes. That they didn't even know why they say or believe the things they do. They just blindly follow the code and these beliefs because that's what they're supposed to do. You then have the main character, Iskat, who is dealing with the death of her master at the first battle of Geonosis, and she doesn't know how to process it. She sees death as just death, as a negative or bad thing, not a joyous thing that is almost supposed to be celebrated because the dead Jedi get to join with the Force afterwards.
Rejoice for those around you who transform into the Force. Mourn them do not. Miss them do not.
Nevertheless, that's just what everyone keeps saying. That's what the Jedi keep telling her. Yet she can tell they don't exactly believe it either. She can tell they're all dealing with, or not dealing with, this pain of loss they're experiencing, especially as the Clone Wars go on and more Jedi keep dying. And it's all because the code forbids them from feeling or embracing these emotions or trying to deal with them. And though maybe the book paints the Jedi in a bit too negative of a light, you could argue, it does present them in a way that really does make you think and helps you understand what sort of went wrong with them or for them. I mean, I've made plenty of videos discussing why the Jedi forbid attachments, and as I've argued in those videos, attachments is not the same thing as just having a friend or people you care about or being compassionate towards others. We know from what Anakin said in Attack of the Clones that compassion is kind of the basis of everything the Jedi are about.
Compassion, which I would define as unconditional love, is central to a Jedi's life. So you might say that we are encouraged to love.
And so yes, the Jedi are allowed to befriend people and shouldn't try to purge their emotions as much as they should try to not be ruled by them. Anyway, it's a book that perhaps helps one see Anakin's side of things a bit better and makes you, or at least me, also see Qui-Gon's side of things a bit more as well. That the Jedi should not just live by these very rigid laws laid forth by the code, that they should instead maybe focus a bit more on compassion like they should, and especially compassion towards each other when they are suffering, and that they should go with the flow of the Force and where it takes them, over listening to the will of the Republic. Well, that's all I got for you this time, and now it's your turn to weigh in on this one. Do you think the Jedi of the prequel era were wrong, or maybe just a bit misguided or lost? Do you think they all should have been maybe a little more like Qui-Gon, or was he maybe even worse than they were in some ways? Or, of course, you can always ask a question for a future lightning response video. Just start your comment off with "Hey Thor" and ask away. Whatever you choose to do, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.